So I was probably 12 years or so old, circa 1970 something, 74 or so. Um, and it was early morning, and I had to get a paper to this one guy at the end of the street that I lived on, Sheffield Drive. And between his house and the next street I needed to go to was a sort of a little copse of woods, but I needed to get the paper there by 5:30 because he needed it by 5:30. And if I didn't get it there by 5:30, he complained to the office. So I know what time it had to have been. And then it was probably March or so, because back then, the snow was kind of on the ground, but it wasn't, wasn't lots of snow. Um, and I was walking through the woods. This area always kind of scared me, but I was walking through the woods, and then I noticed my shadow in front of me, and the branches and the trees, and then the shadows were moving like that, suddenly they're coming close, and I realized there's what, and I looked up, and this object went right over the top of the trees. I didn't know what it was. Um, I, I still don't know what it was, except it couldn't have been a blimp, because if it were a blimp or any kind of airship, I lived in a hilly region. It would have crashed another 200 feet away where it was. And so, and it wasn't until literally decades later when I kind of became aware of UFOs in the zeitgeist of pop culture, that I looked back and said, was that what I saw? It was the lights, and it was kind of, you could kind of see the shadow of it against the sky. Um, it's an anecdote, but it is not explainable. It was totally silent, totally silent. Didn't stop. Nobody got out. I didn't have any missing time or anything like that. But it was enough to solidify in my mind later that these are the kinds of events that people have. Mine are nowhere near as dramatic as a lot of what other people claim. But it solidified that it needs an explanation. And so that's part of what drives me, is like, I don't need anybody else to validate what I saw. And I don't need anybody else to validate why I should be asking the question. So let's just do it. And, but then I come across people who've had much more, personal contact with objects or things or claimed beings, etc. And so I just collect the stories. But, I don't have to be the one collecting the stories. You've seen that book, some of the ones that I gave you. But then there's like books by Jacques Vallée or Richard Dolan. Richard Dolan is a fantastic historian. Just he's writing a series of books on USOs, unidentified submerged objects.
Oh, really?
And he takes hundreds of stories that have been collected over the decades. He's done all the nitty-gritty research, details each of them, but he's a fantastic writer, so he interweaves with his own kind of humor and writing, so it's an engaging read. It's not just a read of facts. Then there's Jacques Vallée, who wrote a book called Wonders in the Sky. And what he did was work with a librarian of international history, who went back through the records. God knows how they found this stuff. Hundreds, thousands of years, finding examples of events that we would today classify as a UFO, but written by the generals, the historians, the kings, the scientists of the time, and recorded on parchment or literature, in the literature. One of the most fantastic is Alexander the Great. In one of his battles, these bright shields showed up in the sky above us. And we saw it as an omen of our eventual win. There's a story in Japan of an object that basically washes up on shore, and a woman gets out of it. It's weird. And this is where someone like Jacques Vallée comes in and tells us, you need to forget about all this alien stuff, even interdimensional stuff. You're dealing with a phenomena that almost acts like a form of consciousness, which, as he puts it, fantastic thing is that to them, reality is negotiable. So again, what you're really talking about, as he presents it, is something like a Boltzmann brain, some sort of force that has an ability to make itself be seen as almost anything it wants to. And his hypothesis or thesis is that, back when we were incredibly primitive, we saw these things as the spirits in the forest. Then we saw them as gods. Then we have God, right? We don't believe in God necessarily anymore. Plenty of people do. I'm not disparaging it. Now we believe in technology, and aliens represent technology. So maybe what we're dealing with is something that is just saying, I'm here. Those of you who are smart enough to recognize what it is that you see, I can engage with you, but you are not alone. So the constant message across time is you're not alone. Mm-hmm. Again, it's just an idea. And it, to me, is kind of particularly feels poetic to put it that way. And what I like about that kind of approach is, there's this story in South America when the conquistadors first showed up at the shore, that the people at the time, who were not primitive, couldn't recognize the ships for what they were.
Right.
Right? But at that moment, their world became both larger and smaller. Larger because they were part of something, smaller because they were less than what they thought they were. Yeah.